Everyday people working 9 to 5, saving up that money, trying to survive, investing in the future, trying to be wise. We're gonna be money heroes. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Nick Johnson, host of Everyday Money Heroes, and I've reached early retirement. I'm here to provide information on how to obtain financial independence and inspire you through sharing stories of everyday people who are turning knowledge into freedom.
That hustle, always reaching for the sky. We're gonna be money heroes, never gonna shy.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Everyday Money Heroes, where we provide information and inspiration to people of all ages to take control of their financial journey. Today, we have a truly special guest who has not only crushed her own money goals, but also helped countless others do the same. She's a nationally recognized money expert featured on Good Morning America, NBC News, Time, and USA Today, known for her unique ability to connect the dots between net worth and self-worth. Armed with degrees in business and psychology, her real credibility comes from leading by example. As a first-generation Filipino American, she and her husband paid off $30,000 of debt in just 3 years and went on to build their first $1 million in net worth in their 30s without credit cards, car loans, or mortgages. She's the founder of Crush Your Money Goals, a movement dedicated to helping those often overlooked by traditional financial services, especially women and communities of color pursue debt, freedom, and financial independence while actually enjoying the journey. She's also a global speaker, a Forbes contributor, and the author of Crush Your Money Goals, which Oprah just named one of the top 10 books of personal growth in 2025. If you're ready to break free from financial stress and start building lasting wealth, you're in the right place. Please welcome to the show, Bernadette Joy. Hello, Bernadette.
Hello, thanks for
Hey,
having me.
hey, it is so great to see you. You know, one of the things that I enjoy most about being a money nerd is that I get to talk to really cool people like
Yeah.
yourself. And one of the things that people deal with is feeling just like they have this burden of debt and that they can never get ahead. And so when people hear that, okay, you paid off $300,000 in debt in just 3 years,
Mhm.
they're like, wow, is this what special powers does Bernadette have that I was not given? So I guess first of all, let's kind of start from there, Bernadette. How, first of all, we all find ourselves in debt at some point. But how did you say, hey, you know what, enough's enough, and I'm going to conquer this thing?
Yeah. Well, I've gotten all sorts of reactions to that. Many of them were like, "Is this fake? Like, this is fake news. Like, there's no
Uh-huh.
way."
Mm-hmm.
And uh, there was a very specific day, January 2016, when I realized that I had $72,000 of just student loans of that
Mm-hmm.
300K, not including all the car payments and the credit cards and I was in a second mortgage that I had no business being in, on top of my primary mortgage. And I remember that's like if I close my eyes, I can still remember that feeling where it felt like someone was like standing on my chest. Like it just felt
Wow.
like, oh my gosh, like I'm sure many people can relate. Like there must have been a point in life where you just felt this extreme anxiety, like you can't breathe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I felt. And my immediate thought was just like, I don't think I'm gonna make it another another year or two. Like if this is how I feel today. And so what can I do? It sounds very simple and almost, kind of animalistic of just like I need to be able to feel like I can like literally take a deep breath. And it didn't feel that way then. And so that day in January when I realized I had taken out that much student loans and I also learned that I did not read the fine print and the student loans were accruing interest daily. And they had
Mm-hmm.
started accruing interest from the moment that I took them out. For some reason in my brain, I thought I had to the interest didn't accrue until after I graduated. So I just completely read everything wrong, or I didn't really pay attention to it before. And as someone who prided themselves in being relatively smart, like that was always one of my identity things. Like
Mm-hmm.
I grew up as a good student, all this stuff. I had never felt more stupid. And so it sounds really silly, but like basically I was just like, I want to feel like I can breathe and I don't want to feel dumb anymore. And that's when I decided I need to do something different.
Wow. Bernadette, we all have to get to the point where we are sick and tired of being sick and tired of, kind of being
Mhm.
in this burden, like this crushing weight, like you said. And it all comes down to us just being willing to just make that choice. Okay, what am I going to do different? And
Mhm.
so one of the things that I know that I dealt with in my journey was that I realized that, um, to me, I was always kind of like, I was extremely frugal. And so I didn't really like get into a lot of debt. I probably was like on the opposite side of like being a little too tight. But I
Mhm.
was always really thoughtful about my time. And so the thing that happened to me, I remember like how you had the aha moment with your student loan payment. I had it when it came to my time. And literally, if something was as small as I recall, we had just built our home and the garbage disposal had stopped working. And so I called the manufacturer because I was always like, hey, you know what? This has a warranty. Send me another one. And so they sent me another one. And I got in at the house and I was like, okay, I'm going to go work on this weekend. And I set it in the pantry. And I was like, man, I got to get around to doing that garbage disposal. And literally, I was going through the pantry one day and I saw the garbage disposal box. And I was like, I got to install this thing. But, sometimes you can see the date when something was delivered. Bernadette, it had been almost 3 years.
Oh my God.
When I realized, I was like, my God, where is the time going? And that's when I realized, I was like, you know what? It wasn't even like debt for me because I was always a saver and an investor. But I was like, I only have so much time. I was like, and I know I haven't been sitting around goofing off during these 3 years. Where did it go? So that's when I
Right.
really had to that's when it shifted for me. It's like, okay, I have to do what I have to do to try to reclaim my time. So I
Right.
completely understand where you're going there. So that's awesome. So you came to the point where it's like, okay, I've got to do something about this. And so there's a thought, but then there's also action. So
Mm-hmm.
at that particular point, you had to do something that, hey, you know what? Okay, I'm thinking about it, but now I have to do something about it. And so, kind of action items for like our listeners that, hey, you know what? Bernadette decided to do this. So if there's just like one thing or just one kind of key thing that you identified that you did to kind of get you to where you are right now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you had mentioned the book Crush Your Money Goals, and in hindsight, at the time, I didn't realize I was doing these steps. And so,
Mhm.
hindsight is 2020. When you look back and you're like, well, when people ask me, how did you pay off all this debt? It spells out that word crush. But the first piece that I did was a C in crush, which was to like curate my accounts, meaning like I had to go figure out what the 72,000 even was. And
Mhm.
and it was the first time in 2 years that I ever logged into that account where all my student loans were sitting and realized that it was made up of several loans. Some of them,
Mhm.
were $5,000 loans, some of them were $20,000 loans. And immediately I felt like, okay, I'm getting somewhere. First of all, I know, I
Mhm.
know where they are. I have my username and password. And I know that it's not one big first again in my brain, I thought it was like one line item that just said $72,000. I didn't realize it was like multiple loans taken out like over different time periods. And so something that happened really quickly was I realized that at least one of those loans were taken out fairly recently enough that if I were to pay it back like pretty immediately, that it wouldn't have accrued any interest. And so what I did was, and at the time, like you, I was a saver. I didn't realize I had this much amount of student loans, but I did have maybe like $10,000 in the bank at one time.
Mhm.
And the reason I had the $10,000 was because back a couple years before that, I had like a major like kidney issue that landed me in the hospital and I had to pay all of this money and the deductible on my plan was $10,000. And so I had to pay
Mhm.
$10,000 out of pocket. And so ever since then I always kept at least $10,000 in
Okay.
my savings for emergencies and stuff. And at the time, I wouldn't recommend this now, but at the time I was like, this feels like an emergency to me because I feel like I can't breathe. And
Yeah.
and so I said to myself, well, like, okay, I understand the concept of net worth. I did take an MBA, so I understand, like I understand kind of these basic concepts. And so, what good is it for me to have this $10,000 sitting here right now if I have $72,000 sitting on the other side, like accruing interest daily?
Right.
So I and I took like a big kind of leap and say, well, I'm going to at least wipe out this first student loan with the money that I had saved up and like get my savings down to like $5,000, which was enough for me to have like 1 or 2 months worth of like extra emergency fund, so not like depleting it all the way. And
Mhm.
immediately I felt like, okay, like I'm getting somewhere, I'm doing something, like at least I save the interest on that. And but even more importantly, and this is why I think a lot of people really like the debt snowball, which is like paying your lowest interest, your lowest balances first.
Mhm.
Was that by like crossing that line item off of my list, like I felt like I was getting momentum. And
Mhm.
so for a lot of people who are looking at paying down debt, I am a big advocate of the debt snowball versus like the avalanche where you pay the highest interest first,
Mhm.
because for someone like me who felt completely overwhelmed, like being able to cross something off of my list and say that I got it done gave me confidence that I could continue the journey.
Yeah, I like the snowball as well because it just gives you that moment. It's something very gratifying. Be able, okay, I completed something.
Yeah,
So that's really beneficial. And oftentimes, like you mentioned with the student loans, I think if you told someone that at the end of 4 years or 6 years, if at the beginning you had to write a check for, if they set you down and said, okay, I want you to sign these papers, it's $150,000 or $75,000, you might be taking more back than that. Okay, I got a $5,000 loan this time, and it just kind of adds up. And over time, you have like this larger amount. So I think it's kind of hard that you don't know in totality what it's going to be till you get to the end, and then it seems so large. So
that's
I
right.
completely understand that. So you made a reference to your book, which is Crush Your Money Goals. I am on the second time around, ma'am. I've already read this book one time.
Wow, thank you.
It
Oh,
is,
that means so much to me.
and guess what it is? Thebomb.com.
Okay, we must be from the same generation because I am so for thebomb.com.
I know, and you said in your book that that's one of your favorite sayings,
Exactly.
thebomb.com,
Exactly.
and it is. I went through there, and definitely what I did know about the book before going into it is that I love myself a good acronym, and I didn't know that Crush was actually an acronym until I got into it and I started reading the book. I'm like, oh, like this even makes it even better. So yeah, I really like a hearty acronym, so I like it. One of the things that I really appreciate in the book are the 25 kind of smart habits that you put into the book. And one of them that I really identified with was like comparison.
Mm,
Is
mhm,
that oftentimes, individuals, that's why they say comparison is a thief of joy,
mhm.
because oftentimes you see like this Instagram perfection life of somebody, and you really don't know the true story behind it. And oftentimes your accomplishments can seem really small compared to somebody else. And so really that really resonated with me because I've always been someone who was okay with being different. And like, for instance, when I was a kid, I was a money nerd. And there were no other money nerds when I was a kid. I could like go to the internet and be like, oh, okay, I'm going to find groups to talk about money. It wasn't a thing like that. And so I think just really being willing to embrace who you are as an individual person really will get you where you need to go in life. So I really resonated with, I believe it was actually the second goal. I mean,
Mhm.
the second tip there. So I really thought it was great. And so you have your book, Crush Your Money Goals. There's also like a coaching program. And
Yeah.
so you went from, being in debt to really knuckling down, getting $300,000 of debt paid in 3 years, to all of a sudden, being someone who is sought after in the financial literacy space. Has this kind of seemed like it's like a whirlwind to you, or like do you have to pinch yourself sometime, or do you just kind of get blown away when people like Bernadette? Because I admit, so little inside stuff. So um, certain people in the personal finance community, I do kind of fanboy after, and I kind of fanboy after Bernadette. I thought she was so cool and so relatable. So when
Mhm.
people meet you, are you like, I'm just Bernadette? And
Yeah.
what I did, anybody can do. Is that how you
Yeah.
feel? Or, how do you deal with all that?
Honestly, my life does not really feel that different
Okay.
from before, in the sense of just like I've always been an introvert, and it's funny when like I go to certain like conferences like FinCon. I just went to
Mm-hmm.
Podfest recently, and people
Mm-hmm.
will come up to me like, "I've never heard of you before," and like I'm wondering like how I missed you or whatever, and I'm like, I can tell you exactly how you missed me because I don't get out of my house very often, and
Uh-huh.
when I do, like, and you may have seen me at FinCon, when I come out of my house, I like expend all my energy and then I come back and like hide for
Mm-hmm.
like another month.
Mm-hmm.
And um and so it only kind of really started hitting me recently. I had shared this with a friend of mine where I was like having like I was just having like a really long day. I had like back-to-back interviews for the book tour and stuff. And I didn't have time to like cook dinner or anything that day, which usually I try to do. And so I went to Trader Joe's and got myself a sandwich or whatever and like ran off to my next appointment. And someone like DM'd me. They're like, "Hey, I follow you on Instagram and I think you're at Trader Joe's. Like, was that you?"
Oh wow.
And I was thinking to myself, I was just like, oh my God, I was such a mess. Like when I was in Trader Joe's, I almost wanted to tell her, like, no, that wasn't me.
That
They
was me.
picked someone else. Because I was like wearing my ugly Crocs and I was like, I was just like such a mess. And then I realized like that there is such a beauty in being able to do this type of work that both you and I get to do to be money nerds, in that
Mhm.
there are a lot of people who want the help and
Mhm.
want to, evolve. And rather than be kind of intimidated by the idea that people might see me in my worst moments or see me at times where I'm not like ideal, like in my ideal state,
Mhm.
that they probably are not even thinking about that at all. They're probably just like, oh, I think I saw you at Trader Joe's and that was probably it. Like, so
Yeah.
I I think the only other thing that has been kind of materially different for me, and this is kind of like odd to say, is that it hasn't felt different in the sense of like this is stuff I've been talking about for almost a decade at this point.
Mhm.
But it was a little bit odd this year for me when like kind of got the endorsement from like the Oprah Daily to say like, oh, this is one of the top 10 books for this year. And I was
Mhm.
at the sushi restaurant with my husband when I got the email about it. And I was just like, I turned to him and I'm like, is my book good? Like I just what, like that's odd. Like I was like, I don't even know how this happened, right?
Mhm.
And what's odd for me to say that is just like this is stuff I've been saying for like 10 years now, but it's interesting that all of a sudden people are like think you're kind of like an overnight thing. Like all of a
Mhm.
sudden people are coming
Right.
out being like, "Oh, wow, like you've been on these shows and do these things." I'm like, "Well, I've been doing this for a while, but now they pay attention because a certain someone said that, like that this is a good book to read." So,
Mhm.
I think I'm saying that to everyone who might be listening to this in the sense of like, don't wait for that external validation to feel like you're on your mission or to feel
Mhm.
like you're doing the right thing. Uh, the recognition, it might be great, but really, if you are following like what it is that you think genuinely helps the people in the community that you want to serve,
Mhm.
then all that other stuff is more just like kind of gravy on top.
Yeah. And that kind of goes back to that comparison again. It's really,
Mhm.
really important as far as, like I said, it's been 10 years and I've heard other people say, it took me X number of years to be an overnight success, you
Mhm.
know, and it's almost when it comes to like, financial independence. And, you kind of make a point in kind of your philosophy is that, you believe that financial literacy is important, but financial independence is the the finish line,
That's right.
and a lot of times you have to deal with that messy middle, and it's not glorious. It's not great. You kind of gotten to the point where like all like little small things that you can check off is done, and now you're kind of waiting for that 25 times number to like kind of get there for you to have that achievement that you like. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we just really have to keep going.
Right.
And one last thing I'll say here before we wrap up, Bernadette. One of the reasons why um, I identified you so much because by default I am an introvert. I
Really?
understand that, and I would have not believed that you were an introvert if I had not heard it come out of your own mouth. It's
Yeah.
like because a lot of times, but you kind of made the reference that you kind of when you step out, for introverts, it takes us a lot of energy to get up sometimes,
Mhm.
and sometimes we're like in like conferences and plays, it takes a lot of out of us, and like, some people who feed on that energy, we enjoy that interaction, but at the same time, it's kind of difficult for us. And so I guess one question, because I know many individuals who say, hey, you know what, I'm an introvert. And I feel as oftentimes I'm overlooked, or I feel as though, the things that I do, because I don't believe in tooting my own horn and things like that, I can't get ahead. So kind of, um, what have you leveraged in
Mm.
your journey as far as saying, you know what, I may be an introvert, but I understand that, there's still something that I can offer or that I still have as much value as someone who might consider themselves to be an extrovert.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're the first person who's asked me this question, so this is great.
Mhm.
Um, I'll say this, last year was really a test for me in 2024 when we knew the book was getting ready to launch. And, so the publisher was just like, you got to be out there everywhere all the time. And so I was like,
Right.
that feels like a lot already. And what I recognized was that, somewhere along the line later last year, in the back half, actually like around FinCon time, was just
Mhm.
like, oh, I'm starting to reach my like cap here. I don't know if I have any more energy to give. And there were like
Mhm.
three things that really helped me kind of move past that as an introvert. Number one, it sounds so like obvious and like I feel like you shouldn't even say it, but like really focusing on getting enough sleep and
Mhm.
changing my diet actually really did help me kind of pull some extra energy
Mhm.
for me day to day. So I started eating a lot more protein, started cutting back on a lot of sugar, and I was like forcing myself to make sure I go to bed by 10 o'clock, no matter
Mhm.
what, for like not even just like the day before a speaking engagement, but like like weeks leading up to it, like getting kind of ready for that. Because like as you saw at FinCon, like I expend a lot of energy when I am in those rooms.
Mhm.
Number two was I again, like we hear a lot about this, but this year I'm learning to say no a lot more to things that just do not feel aligned. I've actually said no to a lot of speaking engagements already this year.
Okay.
Not because I don't want to serve and not because I don't want to do the job, but I realize there are certain speaking engagements where now I have the opportunity to recommend someone else who I think
Okay.
would love the platform or would want the exposure or that would be a better fit for that audience. Whereas before I was like, any speaking engagement that would come my way, I'm like, I have to figure out a way to make it work. Versus
Mm,
because like now we're part of FinCon, like I've been part of FinCon for like several years now. I can easily rattle off like, a dozen other names of like people who
mm,
I think would be equally or better than me for that particular audience. And so learning to share that platform can still be serving without you having to do it yourself.
mm,
Um, and then the last piece is like, I really reflected upon this the last couple of weeks is like, I had to really re-examine my close network of friends. Like, as an introvert, for me, I can't speak to everyone, but like, I've never been good at like small talk and like big crowd settings. Like, I definitely prefer like a small dinner
mhm,
group of friends kind of thing. And because I was pursuing this platform for the last couple of years, I kind of lost touch with some of my closest friends who were watching me from afar and were rooting me on. And when my book came out, they went straight to the bookstore and bought it, like, but I didn't carve out enough time to go refresh with those people. And so this year in 2025, I'm making a very concerted effort to spend one-on-one time with like 3 to 5 of my closest friends and family members. Whereas last year it was like, oh, I'll see if I can fit you in with between all these speaking engagements versus like, no, I will prioritize you guys first. And then if a speaking engagement fits in, then I'll do that.
Well, thank you for that advice, Bernadette, because I know one of the things that I have challenges with is that kind of that large large groups. I'm okay with like kind of small interactions, but the larger groups are very very difficult for me. And one of the things that I realized I used to be told all the time is that a closed mouth don't get fed. So I had to kind of
True.
realize that what I was like, I have to be willing to speak my own worth, which might be challenging for me, but at the same time, if I can't speak it, I can't expect anybody else to. So I really had to get comfortable with that. This has been great, Bernadette. I appreciate all the time that we've had here. Kind of in closing, I would definitely like, first of all, I would recommend all of our listeners to go out and pick up a copy of Crush Your Money Goals here by Bernadette. Also, if the listeners would like to connect with you, what's the best way to connect with you and follow what you're doing moving forward, Bernadette?
Yes. Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I hope we can do this again.
Yes.
Crushyourmoneygoals.com/free guide if you want to we started a new guide this year for anyone who wants to kickstart their money plans alongside the book. That's crushyourmoneygoals.com/free guide. And if you liked the sound of my voice here, I would also recommend grabbing the audiobook. A lot of people have told me that they bought the audiobook and the book to kind of like listen and write along the same time, which I've never heard of before. And I actually thought that was such a great idea. And
Mhm.
then social media wise, you can find me primarily on YouTube at Bernadette Joy, spelled with the word debt,
Mhm.
and on Instagram at Bernadette Joy.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Once again, thank you for your time, Bernadette. Also, if you all enjoyed this conversation here, which I'm sure you did, please take a second to give us a like and also subscribe to follow us so that you can get future content. This is Nick Johnson signing off and reminding you to trust the process. Have a great day.